What would you do if someone called the police on you just for existing, just for moving into a neighborhood where you didn't look the part? When a black couple moved into their dream home, their welcome party wasn't balloons and brownies. It was flashing lights and suspicion, all thanks to a racist neighbor convinced they didn't belong. But as officers arrived and asked questions, the truth about the wife's identity dropped like a bomb, turning judgment into jaw-dropping regret. And here's where it gets real. What happens when the person you try to bring down is 10 times more powerful than you ever imagined? Buckle up, because this isn't just a story of prejudice. It's a story of poetic justice, a reversal so satisfying it'll leave you cheering and questioning how far we've come. It was a bright Saturday morning in the quiet, picturesque suburb of Maple Grove, the kind of place where the biggest excitement was usually a garage sale or a lost dog poster tacked to a light pole. The lawns were freshly trimmed, American flags fluttered lazily in the breeze, and the air smelled faintly of coffee and honeysuckle. It was the sort of neighborhood that prided itself on its order, its silence, and its predictability. Karen Whitmore, a long-time resident and unofficial self-appointed watchdog of the street, sat at her kitchen table sipping her black coffee, which was lukewarm from being reheated twice. She wore a pink floral bathrobe, slippers with worn soles, and an expression that seemed permanently etched in mild disapproval. She had lived in Maple Grove for 23 years. Her children had grown up here, though they had since moved far away. Her husband, Tom, had passed nearly a decade ago, and now it was just her and her routines, watering her petunias at 7 a.m., walking her terrier, Winston, exactly twice a day, and keeping a meticulous eye on the neighborhood from behind her lacy living room curtains. She knew every resident by name, car make, marital history, and lawn care habits. To Karen, any change was suspect, and anything unfamiliar was unwelcome until proven otherwise. So, when a large U-Haul truck rumbled onto the cul-de-sac and stopped in front of the recently renovated colonial-style house next door, Karen stood abruptly. She squinted through the blinds and frowned. The house had been vacant for almost 8 months since the Jeffersons moved to Florida. There had been rumors it was bought, but no one knew by whom. Karen had hoped for a young white family, perhaps newlyweds or retirees looking for peace and quiet. What she saw instead made her pause, then scowl. A black couple stepped out of the truck. The man, tall and athletic-looking, wore a grey t-shirt, jeans and sunglasses. He moved with the ease of someone used to lifting things, strong and confident. The woman, elegant in a cream blouse and dark slacks, looked around the property with a pleased smile. She pulled out her phone, presumably to take a photo. They walked to the back of the truck, opened it, and began unloading boxes. Karen's eyes narrowed. She turned slightly, as if trying to hear what they were saying through the closed window. They were smiling and laughing with each other. She couldn't make out the words, but the joy in their interaction made her uneasy. Something about their comfort and ease disturbed her, though she couldn't have said exactly what it was. Maybe it was how casually they walked on her street. Maybe it was the way the woman threw her head back when she laughed. Maybe it was that they didn't look intimidated. They looked like they belonged. But in Karen's mind, they didn't. She grabbed her phone and opened the neighborhood Facebook group. She hovered over the keyboard but didn't post anything yet. Instead, she watched as the couple continued moving boxes from the truck into the house. She saw the man, Marcus, she would later learn, carry a heavy chair with one hand. The woman, Aaliyah, adjusted a large decorative mirror, giving Karen a glimpse of herself in it as it caught the light. Their movements were purposeful, organized. They weren't fumbling or frantic like inexperienced movers. They even had help. A few friends or maybe family members arrived in 2 more cars. A younger black woman with dreadlocks brought coffee in a carrier tray. A teenage boy with headphones bobbed his head to music while carrying a rolled-up rug. A couple of white neighbors, Steve from across the street and Maria from the corner house, walked over to introduce themselves, smiling and shaking hands. Karen felt a pang of irritation. Too friendly, too fast. It all felt wrong. When the black couple waved toward her window, Karen instinctively ducked behind the curtain. She hadn't realized they could see her. She felt caught, flustered, but when she looked again, their expressions remained friendly. They weren't mocking her. They were simply polite. And that somehow annoyed her even more. By mid-afternoon, the moving truck was nearly empty. Furniture had been brought inside, and the front porch was decorated with a welcome mat that read, "Good vibes only." That particular detail struck Karen like an insult. She snorted under her breath. "Good vibes? We'll see about that." She stepped out onto her porch under the pretense of checking the mail, though her mailbox had been empty for hours. She watched as the couple arranged a few potted plants by their front door. The woman adjusted a wreath and stepped back to admire her work. Karen crossed her arms, pretending not to watch. She stood there for a full 10 minutes, staring without speaking. Eventually, the man noticed her and waved again. Karen stared, no response. She retreated back inside and closed her front door firmly. Inside, she huffed. Her mind raced with excuses. She wasn't racist. Of course not. She had once hired a black man to fix her roof. She liked Oprah, but she had a right to be cautious. People had to earn trust. Just moving in and smiling didn't prove anything. Later that night, after watching the evening news and feeding Winston, she logged back into Facebook. The neighborhood group was active, mostly chatter about yard sales and HOA meetings. Karen clicked on New Post and began typing. "Just a heads up to my fellow Maple Grove residents. Saw some unfamiliar people moving into 213 Greenway today. A lot of traffic in and out. Just something to keep an eye on." She paused, then edited the post. "Not trying to cause concern, but we should be vigilant. You never know these days. Keep your doors locked." She clicked post and sat back, satisfied. Within minutes, her friends had commented in agreement. "Thanks for the heads up, Karen. I saw that too. Hope it's not a party house. That house used to be so nice." None of them had met Marcus or Aaliyah. None of them had knocked on their door, but the tone was set. Karen smiled grimly. She had done her part. Over the next few days, Karen kept her vigil. From her living room window, from her porch, even from the upstairs bedroom window with binoculars. She tracked their schedules, when they left, when they returned. She noted the license plates of their visitors. She timed the delivery trucks, counted the Amazon packages. Each ordinary activity was filtered through a lens of suspicion she couldn't quite explain. It wasn't what they did. It was simply that they were doing it. One morning, she saw Marcus jogging in the early dawn, hoodie pulled over his head, music playing from a phone strapped to his arm. Her stomach turned. A black man in a hoodie, in her neighborhood. She didn't care that it was chilly out. She didn't care that he was minding his own business. She reached for her phone again, thumb hovering over 911, just in case. But she hesitated. Instead, she watched as Marcus finished his run, cooled down on his front lawn, and went inside. Another time, Aaliyah received a large delivery, some expensive-looking artwork by the looks of it. The delivery driver, also black, chatted with her for a few minutes before driving off. Karen watched from her upstairs window, burning with curiosity. She couldn't hear them, but they laughed several times. Aaliyah seemed confident, poised, and important. Karen didn't like not knowing who her neighbor was. She Googled the address. No results. She searched Aaliyah Johnson and Marcus Johnson on social media. Nothing definitive. She even scrolled through LinkedIn trying to find clues. Her irritation grew with each unanswered question. They were too quiet, too composed, too put together. It made her feel powerless. The final straw came when a few more guests arrived one evening. A dinner party, it looked like. 5 cars parked neatly along the curb. Well-dressed people entered with wine and desserts. Laughter floated through the air, and music, not too loud, drifted from the open windows. Karen clenched her teeth. She'd had enough. She picked up the phone and dialed. 911, what's your emergency? Karen lowered her voice to sound calm but concerned. Yes, hi, I'd like to report some suspicious activity. There's a lot of people coming and going at my neighbor's house. I'm not sure what's going on. It seems unusual. It could be some kind of party, or worse. It doesn't feel right. The dispatcher asked for details. Karen gave the address, her name, and said she just wanted someone to check it out. As she hung up, she felt a rush of satisfaction. Let them prove they belong. The morning sun glinted off the blades of Marcus Johnson's lawnmower as he made steady passes across the neatly trimmed front yard. His headphones blocked out the hum of the machine, replacing it with the smooth rhythm of jazz saxophone that matched the calm of the suburban morning. Dressed in navy athletic shorts and a grey t-shirt, he moved with relaxed confidence, sweat lightly dotting his brow. Each stripe he carved into the lawn was clean and even, just how he liked it. He was proud of this home, proud of the work he and Aliyah had put in to make it theirs. It had only been a few days, but everything already felt right. Their dream of a quiet, peaceful life in a beautiful neighborhood was finally becoming reality. Inside the house, Aliyah stood in front of a tall oak bookshelf in their home office, arranging their favorite titles in color-coded order. Her attention was half on the books and half on the legal brief open on her laptop. The room smelled of fresh pine wood and cinnamon, the lingering fragrance of the new candle she had lit that morning. She paused occasionally to glance out the window, where she could see Marcus mowing and Winston, their neighbor's small terrier, chasing butterflies across the shared lawn. Life felt balanced, quiet, just how it should be. Across the street, Karen Whitmore stood rigid behind her living room curtain, a familiar frown etched into her face. The phone in her hand trembled slightly, not from fear, but from tension, a self-righteous cocktail of indignation and paranoia. She had been watching Marcus since he started mowing, her mind filling in blanks with assumptions, twisting the normal into the threatening. Why would a man like him be outside so early? Why was he looking around the property like that? Was he watching the neighborhood or planning something? She couldn't shake the belief that something was off, something dangerous, even if she had no evidence to back it up. That had never stopped her before. She dialed 911. Her voice, tight but practiced, slipped into the receiver. "Yes, there's a suspicious man outside," she said, glancing out the window again. He's walking around a property. I think he might be casing the house. It could be a break-in. I'm not sure, but it just doesn't seem right." The dispatcher asked for clarification. Karen gave Marcus's general description: black male, athletic build, dark clothes. She didn't mention the lawnmower or that he'd been outside for over 30 minutes doing yard work. She didn't mention that it was his house. She didn't say that she'd watched the same man unload moving boxes into that home 2 days ago. What she did say, however, was laced with enough ambiguity to trigger a response. "Please send someone to check it out," she insisted. "This is a quiet neighborhood. We don't usually see that kind of activity." The call ended. Karen let out a breath and returned to her vigil at the window, heart racing, not from fear, but from anticipation. She'd done her part. She expected gratitude. She expected results. 10 minutes later, the sound of sirens pierced the stillness. 2 police cruisers turned the corner, lights flashing, tires crunching against the curb as they rolled to a stop in front of Marcus and Aliyah's home. Marcus, midway through a final pass on the lawn, paused. He pulled out one earbud and turned toward the street. Confusion flickered across his face. He glanced up and down the block, wondering where the emergency was. When the officers stepped out and approached him, their hands resting casually, but ready, on their holstered weapons, Marcus immediately understood. He stopped moving, raised his hands slightly in a show of peace. "Can I help you, officers?" he asked, his tone steady and respectful. Inside the house, Aliyah had seen the flashing lights from the window. Her heart skipped. She set down the book in her hand, quickly grabbed her ID and business card from the office drawer, and walked briskly to the door. Meanwhile, Karen stood outside now, her arms crossed, watching with a smug sense of vindication. Neighbors began to peek through blinds and open doors. Steve and Maria from across the street appeared at their porch, startled by the commotion. The officers began questioning Marcus. Where was he from? What was he doing here? Did he live in the house? "I live here," Marcus said, motioning toward the freshly painted door behind him. "My wife and I just moved in last week." Still, the officers pressed. One of them looked over his shoulder as if waiting for someone to run out. The other asked for ID. Marcus sighed and nodded toward the front door. "Sure," he said. "My wife's inside. She can get it." Right on cue, Aaliyah stepped out. She walked with calm authority, heels clicking softly against the walkway, her posture upright, her expression controlled. She didn't ask questions or make accusations. She simply handed over her government ID and business card without a word. The officer who took it glanced down at the card. His brow furrowed, then lifted. His entire demeanor shifted. He cleared his throat. "Dr. Aaliyah Johnson, United States Assistant District Attorney?" The change in his voice was palpable, no longer clipped, no longer suspicious. Respect slipped in, almost apologetically, as if he suddenly realized the weight of what had just happened. His partner looked over, silently reading the situation and stepping back just a bit. Marcus watched the subtle transformation, jaw tight. Karen's smile vanished. The officer looked toward her porch where she was now frozen, watching the interaction like a ghost caught in daylight. He took a step in her direction, then turned back to Aaliyah. "Apologies, ma'am. We received a call reporting suspicious activity." Aaliyah nodded slowly. Her voice was calm but firm. "Suspicious activity, meaning my husband mowing the lawn? Or the fact that we're black and live in this neighborhood?" Neither officer responded immediately. Karen suddenly found herself the center of attention. The officer looked directly at her and called out, "Ma'am, did you make this call?" Karen hesitated. I thought something was wrong." Aaliyah turned her head slightly, looking directly at Karen for the first time since the incident began. Her eyes were sharp, focused, and unwavering. "You thought something was wrong," she repeated, voice cutting through the silence. "I saw someone outside," Karen offered weakly, her voice less confident now. I didn't know." "You saw my husband mowing our lawn," Aaliyah said, "and you assumed he was a criminal." The words hung in the air. The neighbors, who had gathered at a safe distance, watched in awkward silence. Some looked at Karen, others at the officers. Steve coughed and shook his head. Maria whispered something to him and pulled him back inside. Even Winston, the terrier, had gone quiet. The officer handed Aaliyah her ID back, nodded, and offered another apology. "There's no issue here," he said. "Thank you for your time." Marcus gave a short, tight smile. "No problem, officer. Happens more often than you'd think." As the squad cars backed away, the flashing lights fading, the atmosphere shifted. The neighborhood, once a picture of peace and quiet, had been punctured, its silent codes and unseen biases exposed. Karen remained on her porch, eyes glued to the sidewalk, as if trying to make sense of what had just unfolded. Her heart pounded in her chest, not from vindication, but from humiliation, from recognition. Marcus and Aaliyah stood side by side watching her. Neither said a word. They didn't have to. Within 48 hours of the police confrontation on Maple Grove, the neighborhood that once prided itself on peaceful quiet was at the center of a nationwide conversation. It began with a short, shaky cell phone video recorded by a teenager across the street. Kayla, a high school junior with a knack for noticing the stories others missed. She had filmed the entire incident from her bedroom window. Marcus, standing in his front yard, bewildered, lawnmower idle, the squad cars flashing, the moment Aaliyah calmly presented her ID, and most damning of all, Karen Whitmore standing on her porch, arms crossed and smirking, clearly watching as events unfolded. Kayla uploaded the video to TikTok with the caption, "When your neighbor calls the cops on the new black family, then finds out the wife is a federal prosecutor. Know your neighbors, or Karen culture." Within an hour, the video had 10,000 views. By nightfall, it had gone viral, shared by influencers, lawyers, activists, and celebrities. The comments poured in faster than Kayla could read them. "This is why we say systemic racism isn't just in the police. It's in your neighborhoods. She called the cops on her neighbors for mowing their lawn. That woman didn't just get educated, she got professionally embarrassed." The hashtag #KnowYourNeighbors trended on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Major news outlets picked up the story the next morning. Local stations led with the footage. National anchors debated the implications. Talk shows aired segments titled "When Racism Comes Knocking Next Door." By Monday, Karen's name was known far beyond Maple Grove. Her smug porch stance became a meme, photoshopped into scenes from movies, TV shows, even protest art. The internet dubbed her Porch Karen. Her employer, a mid-size real estate firm, received thousands of emails, phone calls, and social media comments demanding accountability. One viral tweet read, "Would you trust this woman to sell your home after what she did to her neighbors?" The firm issued a statement by Tuesday morning. "We are reviewing this matter seriously and are committed to values of equality and inclusion." Internally, Karen's world began to shrink. The very people who once attended her garden parties or waved politely during neighborhood walks were suddenly silent. No more small talk at the grocery store, no friendly waves on morning walks. Parents at the school drop-off avoided eye contact. The Homeowners Association called an emergency meeting. Though they couldn't force Karen to leave, they unanimously voted to strip her of her position as neighborhood watch captain, a title she had held for years with pride, even arrogance. Karen tried to issue a statement online. She recorded a short video in her kitchen, makeup carefully applied, voice trembling with carefully curated regret. "I didn't mean to cause harm," she said. "I was just looking out for my community. Things got misinterpreted." But the video fell flat. Comments flooded in, accusing her of only caring because she'd been caught. Meanwhile, the atmosphere around the Johnsons shifted entirely. What began as a tense, uncomfortable welcome transformed into something warmer. In the days following the incident, neighbors, many of whom had been silent witnesses to the event, began knocking on their door. First came the Thompsons, an elderly couple from 3 houses down. They brought homemade lemon squares and a handwritten note apologizing for the neighborhood's failure to stand up sooner. Then came the Guyans, with a box of chocolates and a potted fern. Even Steve and Maria, who had seen the whole thing unfold from their porch, stopped by with fresh tamales and heartfelt apologies. "We should have said something sooner," Maria admitted, her eyes moist. "We didn't know what to do, but silence isn't an excuse." The Johnsons, though cautious at first, received the gestures with grace. They invited each visitor in, accepted their words, and opened conversations many had long avoided. Aaliyah's calm composure and Marcus's steady kindness began to soften the nerves of the neighborhood. They weren't just victims, they were people, professionals, and now respected members of the community. Letters came in too, some handwritten, others typed and formal. One came from the mayor's office, an official statement condemning racial profiling and commending the Johnsons for their professionalism and patience. Another came from the local high school, asking Aaliyah to speak at an upcoming assembly on justice and community leadership. The local police department issued its own statement, noting that the responding officers had followed protocol, but emphasizing a renewed commitment to bias training and community relations. One officer, the one who had initially taken Aaliyah's card, privately sent a letter of apology, acknowledging how the situation could have escalated and expressing gratitude that it hadn't. Still, not all reactions were clean and simple. Karen's supporters, few but vocal, began leaving comments on news articles claiming she was the real victim, that her intentions had been twisted. Some suggested the Johnsons had moved in looking for trouble, or that the video didn't tell the whole story. These voices, however, were largely drowned out by a broader cultural consensus that Karen's behavior was unacceptable. Schools used the video in classroom discussions about implicit bias. Churches gave sermons on neighborly love and the dangers of assumption. Activist groups reached out to Aaliyah, offering platforms for her to speak, collaborate, and lead initiatives for more inclusive neighborhoods. The Johnsons didn't seek fame, but it came anyway. They used it wisely. Aaliyah participated in podcasts and panels about racial bias in suburban communities. Marcus was interviewed about the emotional toll of being constantly scrutinized for simply existing. Their story became more than a viral video. It became a catalyst. Back on Maple Grove, changes took root. The HOA proposed new diversity and inclusion measures, including a community watch training program emphasizing de-escalation and anti-bias practices. Several families who had previously avoided uncomfortable conversations began opening up. Children asked questions their parents couldn't ignore. People paid attention. Karen, meanwhile, remained behind her curtains. She filed a complaint against the HOA for removing her from her post. It was denied. She tried to sue for defamation, but no lawyer would take the case. Her isolation grew. Once considered a fixture of the neighborhood, she became a cautionary tale. In quiet moments, she watched through the window as the Johnsons hosted barbecues, chatted with neighbors, and walked hand in hand down the sidewalk. It was a different kind of spotlight than the one she had known. One not built on control or fear, but on respect, resilience, and earned trust. A week after the video had swept through the internet like a wildfire, Maple Grove had changed. The air felt heavier, but not with hostility, with introspection. Conversations were different now. Families that had once shared only weather talk over picket fences now discussed bias, privilege, and awareness. Kids asked their parents why someone like Karen would make a phone call like that. The answer never came easy. Karen Whitmore had barely left her house in days. Her garden, once manicured to suburban perfection, now looked forgotten. Dead leaves blew across her porch steps. Her mailbox overflowed with letters, most of them unread. The only screen she looked at was the television, turned low, flickering between news channels and the occasional rerun of something forgettable. Social media was a battlefield she refused to enter again. And yet the silence grew too loud. Shame, when left to itself, festers. So on a calm Sunday afternoon, Karen found herself standing at the Johnsons' door, clutching a small bouquet of sunflowers from her own garden, the last things she'd managed to tend. She knocked softly. It took a few seconds before the door opened. Aaliyah stood there, composed as ever, dressed casually, but with a kind of professional grace that couldn't be undone by sweatpants. She looked at Karen without expression, her gaze steady. Karen hesitated, then spoke. I wanted to apologize. I misjudged you. I was wrong. Aaliyah didn't move. Her tone was level, measured. You didn't just misjudge us. You endangered us. You saw us and assumed the worst, and you acted on that. Karen swallowed, her voice cracking slightly. I know, and I've been trying to understand why. I didn't realize how much I'd let my fears, or whatever they were, shape my actions. Aaliyah studied her for a long moment. You need to ask yourself why you thought we were suspicious for simply existing, why that reaction felt normal to you. Karen nodded slowly. I am asking, and I'm listening. I promise you that. There was a long pause. The bouquet felt heavier in her hands now, useless. Aaliyah didn't smile, but she reached out and accepted the flowers, then nodded, her expression not warm, but not cold either. She stepped back inside and closed the door gently. Karen stood there for another moment, staring at the closed door. For the first time, she didn't feel angry or misunderstood. She just felt accountable. That night, she went online, not to post or defend, but to learn. She read articles, watched interviews. She found a podcast where Aaliyah had recently been a guest, speaking calmly, powerfully about the experience, systemic bias, and the urgent need for people to face their discomfort. Karen listened to every word, some more than once. A few days later, she attended a community meeting held at the town library. The topic, implicit bias and suburban racism. The Johnsons weren't there, not that Karen had expected them to be, but many others from Maple Grove were. Some came out of curiosity, some with defensiveness, others with genuine concern. Karen sat in the back row, quiet, hands in her lap. The moderator opened with statistics and then real stories. People spoke about microaggressions they'd experienced, times they hadn't spoken up, and the culture of silence that protected people like Karen for too long. During the Q&A, Karen stayed silent, but she took notes. At one point, a young man shared a story about his father being followed home by a neighbor who didn't believe he lived there. Karen felt her stomach drop. That could have been Marcus. In the weeks that followed, Karen kept attending events. Not because anyone asked her to, not because she thought it would fix everything, but because for the first time in her life she saw the truth of the world beyond her bubble. She reached out to the HOA to suggest a new community initiative, one that would include workshops on equity, open forums for discussions, and a neighborhood mentoring program that paired longtime residents with new arrivals. Some were skeptical, others were surprised. A few rejected it outright, but the motion passed, barely. Karen volunteered to organize the first event. When it came time for the gathering, Karen stood at the edge of the community center's multi-purpose room, arranging chairs, placing pitchers of water, and wondering if anyone would even show up. To her surprise, more than a dozen residents walked in, some she'd known for years, others she'd only ever waved at. A few she hadn't seen since the incident. She didn't speak first. Instead, she invited a facilitator from a local non-profit to lead the group in guided conversations. The room filled with emotion, discomfort, a few tears, and many realizations. For some, it was the first time they'd ever said the word racism aloud in relation to their community. Afterward, a young couple approached Karen. "We moved in last month. Honestly, we were nervous after seeing what happened online, but we came tonight because we wanted to believe people here are trying." Karen nodded, feeling something shift. Not absolution, not redemption, but a kind of slow, heavy healing. At home, she still had hard days. The comments online didn't disappear. Some co-workers remained distant. Her relationship with her children was strained. Her son in particular had confronted her directly after the video. "How could you do that to someone who looks like my friends?" he had asked. She had no answer then, but she was working on one. Karen started seeing a therapist, not for pity, but for perspective. They talked about her upbringing, the biases she'd absorbed unconsciously, the fear of losing control, the illusion of safety that came with authority. She stopped trying to explain away her actions. She began to accept them for what they were. One afternoon, several weeks after her apology, Karen saw Marcus outside walking their dog. She hesitated, but then stepped out onto her porch. "Hi, Marcus," she called, her voice unsure. He looked up, gave a brief nod, and kept walking. Not cold, just cautious. Karen didn't expect more than that. In a world where one phone call could destroy lives, she had learned that trust was not a right. It had to be earned. Slowly. Consistently. And she was willing to wait, to do the work, to sit in the discomfort and grow through it, because the lesson had been learned, and it echoed in her bones. All it had taken was one call, and the right woman to answer it. If you liked this story, please like, subscribe, and share it with others so they can learn something from it too.